Have you ever trusted someone so completely that the thought of their betrayal seemed impossible? I did, and what I discovered shattered everything I believed about love, loyalty, and the person I thought I knew better than anyone else. This is the story of how I found out my girlfriend was living a double life, and how I made the hardest decision of my entire existence. Stay with me, because what happened next will shock you to your core. It started on a Tuesday evening. Nothing special, just an ordinary day that would soon become the turning point of my life. My girlfriend Sarah had been coming home late from work for the past 3 weeks, always with the same explanation that her workload had suddenly increased. She'd walk through the door exhausted, barely able to keep her eyes open, mumbling about reports and deadlines and impossible clients. I believed every single word, because that's what you do when you love someone. You trust them without question. Little did I know that every late night was carefully crafted deception. Every tired smile was a mask hiding a truth that would break me. I remember making her favorite dinner on those nights, keeping it warm in the oven while I waited for her to come home. Sometimes I'd fall asleep on the couch, and she'd wake me up with a gentle kiss on the forehead, apologizing for being late again. She'd tell me about her demanding boss, about the pressure she was under, about how she was working so hard for our future together. The irony of those words now makes my stomach turn. I was the supportive boyfriend, encouraging her career, telling her I was proud of her dedication, never once suspecting that her dedication was to something entirely different. The truth has a way of revealing itself when you least expect it, and mine came crashing down on a Friday afternoon. I had decided to surprise her at work with her favorite coffee and pastries, because I thought she needed a pick-me-up after all those exhausting weeks. I walked into her office building with a smile on my face, excited to see the joy in her eyes when I showed up unexpectedly. The receptionist pointed me toward the executive floor, mentioning that Sarah had been spending a lot of time there lately. That comment should have been my first clue, but I was too wrapped up in my romantic gesture to pay attention. I took the elevator up, balancing the coffee carrier in one hand and the pastry box in the other, rehearsing in my mind how surprised she'd be. The executive floor was quiet. Most people had already left for the weekend, and the hallway stretched before me like a path to my doom. I walked past empty offices and conference rooms until I reached the corner office, the one with her boss's name on the door. Through the partially open door, I heard her laugh, that intimate laugh she reserved for private moments, and my heart started racing for all the wrong reasons. I pushed the door open slightly, and what I saw would be burned into my memory forever. There she was, my girlfriend of 3 years, sitting on her boss's desk with his hands on her waist, laughing at something he whispered in her ear. They were so absorbed in each other that they didn't notice me standing there, frozen in the doorway like a statue. The coffee carrier slipped from my hand, crashing to the floor with a sound that echoed through the quiet office, and that's when they both turned to look at me. The expression on her face changed from joy to horror in a split second, her eyes widening as she realized what I had just witnessed. Time seemed to stop as we all stood there, the truth hanging in the air like a thick fog, undeniable and suffocating. I didn't say a word. I couldn't. My voice was trapped somewhere deep in my chest, along with my shattered heart. I turned and walked away, ignoring her calls, ignoring the sound of her footsteps as she tried to follow me down the hallway. The elevator doors closed just as she reached them, and through the narrowing gap, I saw tears streaming down her face, but I felt nothing except numbness. The ride down felt like an eternity, each floor a reminder of how high I had allowed myself to hope, and how far I was now falling. When I reached the ground floor, I walked out of that building and didn't look back, my mind racing with images I desperately wanted to unsee. I drove home in a daze, barely aware of the traffic around me, operating on autopilot while my brain tried to process what had just happened. Every memory we had shared now felt tainted. Every moment of happiness now seemed like a lie, and I questioned everything about our relationship. Had she ever really loved me, or was I just convenient while she pursued her real goals? How many of those late nights were actually spent with him, and how long had this been going on? The questions multiplied in my mind like a virus, each one more painful than the last, and I had no answers, only the crushing weight of betrayal. When I got home, I sat in my car for 20 minutes, staring at our apartment building, knowing that everything inside would remind me of her. Our home, our space, the life we had built together, all of it now felt contaminated by her deception. I finally forced myself to go inside, and as soon as I closed the door behind me, my phone started ringing. It was her. Of course it was her, calling over and over again, but I couldn't bring myself to answer. I let it ring, each call a reminder of her betrayal, until finally I turned it off completely. That night, I packed all of her belongings into boxes, every piece of clothing, every photograph, every little item that she had gradually moved into my apartment over the years, erasing her presence from my space, just as she had erased my trust. She showed up at my door the next morning, looking like she hadn't slept at all, her eyes red and swollen from crying. I opened the door, but didn't invite her in. Standing in the doorway like a barrier between her and the sanctuary she no longer had the right to enter. She immediately started talking, words tumbling out of her mouth in a desperate rush, trying to explain, trying to make me understand, trying to minimize what she had done. She told me it wasn't what it looked like, even though we both knew that was a lie, even though I had seen exactly what it was with my own eyes. Her excuses were pathetic, her reasoning was insulting, and every word she spoke made me respect her less. Then came the confession that made everything even worse, if that was possible. She admitted that yes, she had been involved with her boss, but she insisted it didn't mean anything. She said it was just a strategy, a means to an end, a way to secure the promotion she had been chasing for months. Can you imagine hearing those words from someone you loved? She was trying to justify her betrayal by calling it a career move, as if that made it any better, as if that somehow lessened the pain of her deception. She actually expected me to understand that she had traded our relationship, our trust, our future together, for a job title and a salary increase. The audacity of her explanation was almost as shocking as the betrayal itself. She begged me to listen, to give her a chance to explain everything, to understand the pressure she was under at work. She talked about how competitive her industry was, how hard it was for women to advance, how she felt like she had no choice but to do whatever it took to get ahead. I listened to her rationalizations, her justifications, her attempts to make herself the victim in this situation, and I felt my heart harden with every word. None of it mattered. None of her reasons changed what she had done. None of her excuses could repair the trust she had shattered. She had made a choice, a conscious decision to betray me, and now she wanted me to sympathize with her struggles while ignoring my pain. She grabbed my hands, her tears falling onto my skin, begging me not to throw away 3 years over one mistake. One mistake, she called it, as if it was a simple error in judgment, rather than a calculated pattern of deception that had lasted for weeks. She promised it would never happen again, that she had already told her boss it was over, that she chose me over the promotion, over her career, over everything. But her promises felt hollow, her words felt meaningless, because how could I ever trust her again? How could I believe anything she said when she had lied to my face for weeks, when every "I love you" had been spoken while she was involved with someone else? The foundation of our relationship had crumbled, and she was trying to rebuild it with the same broken pieces. I told her she needed to leave, that I needed space to think, but she refused to go. She sat down on the floor outside my apartment door, crying and pleading, making a scene that had my neighbors peeking out of their doors. She called and texted constantly, sent me long emails detailing every moment of her affair, as if knowing the details would somehow make it better rather than worse. She enlisted her friends to call me, to vouch for her, to tell me how sorry she was, and how much she loved me. The pressure was overwhelming, but through it all, one thing remained crystal clear in my mind. I could not go back to her. I could not pretend this never happened. I could not sacrifice my self-respect for the sake of a relationship built on lies. Days turned into a week, and her desperation only intensified, morphing into something that started to concern me. She would show up at my apartment at all hours, sometimes in the middle of the night, banging on my door and sobbing loudly enough to wake the entire floor. She sent me hundreds of messages, some apologetic, some angry, some that didn't make any sense at all, rambling about how she couldn't live without me. Her friends started calling me with worried voices, telling me they were concerned about her mental state, that she wasn't eating or sleeping, that she was falling apart. Part of me felt guilty, wondering if I was being too harsh, but a larger part of me knew that her breakdown was not my responsibility, that I had to protect my own well-being first. I finally had to make it absolutely clear that there was no chance of reconciliation, no possibility of us getting back together, no future for the relationship she had destroyed. I met her one final time in a public place, with a friend nearby for support, and I told her in the clearest terms possible that it was over, permanently and completely. I explained that what she did wasn't just about the physical betrayal. It was about the lies, the manipulation, the complete disregard for my feelings and our relationship. I told her that even if I could somehow forgive her, I could never forget, and I refused to spend the rest of my life wondering if she was being truthful or looking over my shoulder for the next betrayal. Her face crumpled as I spoke, but I forced myself to continue, to not let her tears manipulate me into backing down from what I knew was right. I handed her the final box of her belongings and told her she was no longer welcome at my apartment, that any future contact would be considered harassment. She tried to grab my hands again, but I pulled away, maintaining the boundary I desperately needed. She asked me how I could be so cold, how I could throw away everything we had, how I could not give her a second chance when she was willing to do anything to make it right. I looked at her and said something that had been forming in my mind for days. I wasn't throwing anything away, because she had already done that when she decided her career advancement was worth more than our relationship. The silence that followed was deafening, and I could see in her eyes that she finally understood that this was really happening, that no amount of begging or crying or manipulation would change my mind. That should have been the end of it, but what happened next showed me just how deeply my decision had affected her. A few days later, I received a call from a number I didn't recognize, and when I answered, a professional voice introduced herself as Dr. Martinez, a therapist. My heart sank because I immediately knew why she was calling. The doctor explained that Sarah had come to see her in crisis, that she was exhibiting signs of severe emotional dependence and was struggling to function without the relationship. Dr. Martinez was careful not to violate confidentiality, but she wanted me to know that Sarah was getting help, and she gently asked if there was any possibility of closure conversations that might help Sarah move forward. I appreciated the doctor's professionalism, but I made it clear that I had already provided all the closure I could, and that any further contact would only set back Sarah's progress. The call shook me more than I wanted to admit, forcing me to confront the full impact of my decision. Sarah had actually sought professional help because she couldn't cope with the breakup, because her attachment to me had apparently become so strong that losing the relationship sent her into a psychological crisis. Part of me felt a twisted validation that she truly did care, that her pain was real, that the relationship had meant something to her. But another part of me, the rational part that was fighting to maintain my boundaries, recognized that this level of dependence wasn't healthy, wasn't love, but rather an unhealthy attachment that would have eventually suffocated us both. Her addiction to me, as the doctor had subtly implied, was a problem that existed independent of my decision to end things, a problem that my staying would have only enabled rather than solved. The hardest moments came late at night, when the apartment was quiet and I was alone with my thoughts. Despite everything she had done, despite the betrayal and the lies and the manipulation, I missed her. I missed the good times we had shared, the inside jokes, the comfortable routine we had built together. I missed having someone to talk to at the end of the day, someone to cook dinner with, someone to share my life with. But then I would remember the look on her face when I caught her with her boss, the pathetic excuses she made, the way she tried to minimize her betrayal, and the longing would transform into anger. I realized that what I missed wasn't actually her, but rather the version of her I thought she was, the person I had fallen in love with who apparently never truly existed. Friends kept asking me if I thought I'd ever be able to trust someone again after what happened, and honestly, I didn't have a good answer. The betrayal had shaken my faith in my own judgment, made me question how I could have been so blind to what was happening right under my nose. If I couldn't see that my girlfriend of 3 years was having an affair, how could I trust myself to recognize red flags in future relationships? The paranoia was real, the fear that anyone I dated might be hiding secrets, might be capable of the same deception. But I also knew that I couldn't let her actions destroy my ability to connect with people, couldn't let one person's betrayal poison every future relationship. The work of rebuilding my trust would take time, possibly years, but it was work I was willing to do because the alternative was living in fear and isolation forever. As time passed, the acute pain of the betrayal began to fade into a dull ache that I could mostly ignore. I started going out with friends again, picking up hobbies I had neglected, focusing on my own career and personal growth. Each day without her drama, without her manipulation, without her desperate attempts to contact me, I felt a little bit lighter. I started to understand what people meant when they talked about choosing peace over chaos, about protecting your energy from toxic people, about recognizing that sometimes the best thing you can do for yourself is walk away. The old me would have tried to fix things, would have given her another chance, would have convinced myself that love meant forgiving anything. But the new me, the me that had been forged in the fire of betrayal, understood that real love includes self-love, and self-love means not accepting treatment that diminishes your worth. I won't pretend that there weren't moments of weakness when I almost called her, almost reached out, almost convinced myself that maybe we could try again. There were nights when loneliness felt overwhelming, when the idea of going back to her seemed easier than facing the uncertainty of starting over. But each time I felt that pull, I would remind myself of why I left, would replay in my mind the moment I saw her with her boss, would remember the pathetic justifications she offered. Those memories became my armor, protecting me from my own weakness, keeping me strong when my resolve wavered. I wrote them down in a journal, so that on days when I forgot the pain, when nostalgia made the past seem better than it was, I could read my own words and remember the truth. The most surprising part of this whole experience was discovering how strong I actually was, how capable I was of making hard decisions and sticking to them even when it hurt. Before this, I had always thought of myself as someone who needed a relationship to be complete, who defined success partly through romantic partnership. But surviving this betrayal, choosing myself over a comfortable lie, proved to me that I was stronger than I had ever given myself credit for. I didn't need her or anyone else to be whole. I was already complete on my own. That realization was worth all the pain, all the sleepless nights, all the doubt and guilt and fear. I had chosen my peace over her presence, my self-respect over her desperate pleas, my future over our broken past, and for the first time in a long time, I felt truly proud of myself. Looking back now, I can see the red flags I missed, the little signs that something was off that I explained away because I didn't want to see them. The way she guarded her phone more carefully, the new clothes she bought that she said were for work, the perfume she started wearing that I hadn't given her. They were all there, breadcrumbs leading to the truth, but I'd been too trusting, too comfortable, too sure of our relationship to follow them. This experience taught me that blind trust isn't the same as love, that healthy relationships include transparency and honesty, not just assuming the best about your partner. It taught me that when something feels off, it probably is, and ignoring your intuition to maintain peace is just delaying inevitable pain. The aftermath of her breakdown, the therapy she needed, the emotional crisis she experienced, these things were not my fault or my responsibility to fix. I want to be clear about that because there was a time when I felt guilty, when I wondered if leaving her when she was so fragile made me cruel. But staying with someone out of guilt or fear of what they might do to themselves is not love, it's hostage-taking. I couldn't be responsible for her mental health, couldn't set myself on fire to keep her warm, couldn't sacrifice my own well-being for someone who had shown such little regard for it. Her addiction to me, as the therapist had implied, was something she needed to work through independently, not something she could heal by keeping me trapped in a relationship I no longer wanted. In the end, I learned that choosing peace isn't selfish. It's necessary for survival. I learned that you can love someone and still walk away when they hurt you. I learned that forgiveness doesn't always mean reconciliation, that you can release your anger without giving someone another chance to hurt you. Most importantly, I learned that my worth isn't determined by someone else's ability to see it, that when someone shows you who they really are through their actions, you should believe them. Sarah showed me that she was willing to sacrifice our relationship for professional advancement, that she could lie to my face for weeks, that she valued a promotion more than my trust. Those revelations were painful, but they were also clarifying, making my decision not just easy, but inevitable. Today, I'm building a new life, one where I trust myself more and others less automatically. I'm learning to be comfortable alone, to enjoy my own company, to find fulfillment in things that don't depend on another person's presence or approval. I'm working on my career, investing in friendships, discovering who I am outside of a relationship that defined so much of my recent past. There are still hard days, moments when I see something that reminds me of her, times when I wonder what she's doing and if she ever thinks about what she destroyed. But those moments are becoming fewer and farther between, replaced by new memories, new experiences, new possibilities that don't include her. If you're going through something similar, if you've been betrayed by someone you trusted completely, if you're struggling with the decision to stay or go, I want you to know that choosing yourself isn't selfish. Protecting your peace isn't cruel. Setting boundaries isn't punishment. You deserve someone who would never put you in the position of having to make such a choice. Someone whose loyalty doesn't waver when opportunities for advancement present themselves. Someone who values your relationship more than any job title or salary increase. Don't let anyone convince you that forgiveness requires forgetting, that love means accepting any behavior, that time invested means you owe someone infinite chances to hurt you. The journey from betrayal to healing isn't linear, and I won't stand here and tell you I'm completely over it, that I don't still feel the sting sometimes when I think about what happened. But I am healing, slowly and surely, building a life that feels authentic and peaceful in mine. I'm learning to trust again, cautiously and carefully, protecting my heart while remaining open to connection. I'm discovering that being alone is better than being with someone who makes you feel alone, that peace of mind is worth more than any relationship, and that sometimes the greatest act of love is knowing when to let go. So yes, I chose my peace over her presence, my dignity over her desperate appeals, my future over our painful past. And while it was the hardest decision I've ever made, walking away from someone I loved who didn't love me enough to be honest, it was also the best decision I've ever made. Because at the end of the day, I have to live with myself, have to look at myself in the mirror, have to build a life I'm proud of. And I couldn't do any of that while accepting treatment that diminished my worth, while staying in a relationship built on lies, while sacrificing my self-respect for someone else's comfort. I chose me finally and completely, and that choice saved my life in ways I'm still discovering. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it.